let's talk about cold bore shots, fouling shots, how that affects accuracy and how you shoot. That's what we're going to tackle today on Gunfighter Life. Welcome to the podcast, where we talk about this kind of stuff the right way, with God Almighty at the center, biblical Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. On that, I'm blessed to serve you as host. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That's paramount in everything that I do. The podcast is no different. As far as firearms background, military and law enforcement, private security contracting, competition shooting, hunting since I was a boy, and some other stuff, bio bullet points in the show notes. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Okay, with that, I'm going to try and lay a foundation here, because I think to do this, I think it's important for myself to remember that I didn't always know this stuff. You know something for so long and you understand it, you forget that at one point you didn't know it, right? You forget all the things you've learned along the way. If we look at accuracy, we can bifurcate that into two different categories. We talk about accuracy for you, which I would define simply as your ability to hit the target, meaning you're accurate, your ability with your weapon to hit your target. If we talk about mechanical accuracy of, let's say, a rifle, mechanical accuracy, it could be a pistol or a shotgun, but let's stick with rifle. Mechanical accuracy. How close can that machine put a projectile in the same place every time? No rifle in the world has ever been perfect, because it's made by man, and man is not perfect. And we don't make perfect things, but we can make something better. We can make a more accurate rifle, right? The goal is for accuracy for a machine, for a rifle accuracy, is to put the projectile in exactly the same place every time. That's how I would define a rifle's accuracy, the ability to get as close to putting a projectile in the same place every time. And again, no rifle does that, but does that perfectly, but we can get closer with some than others. But that's the goal, is to put the projectile in the same place every single time. So, with that said, one of the keys to that is consistency. You need the same conditions every time. For example, the same ammunition. You need the same point of aim, point of impact, right? You need, like, for instance, you can't have loose mounts. That'd be a real obvious one. You can't have loose scope mounts, because if you do, you're going to change something, and by definition, something's going to be different, so you can't expect your projectile to land in the same place over and over again. One of those, and there's a lot of different, instruments that play into the symphony that is accuracy, that have to go all well together and play well together. But one of those is the condition of your bore, right? You want your bore in the same condition, or as close to it every time. If you change the condition of your bore, by definition, you are changing something in the way that machine functions. You're going to change the amount of friction, for example. If you remember back to like basic high school physics, when metal heats up, it gets larger. When it gets cold, it contracts and gets smaller. So a cold bore versus a hot bore could literally have a different bore diameter. You might be talking about thousandths of an inch, but that could be all it takes, and often is all that it takes. So you're going to have a different condition in your bore from a cold bore to a warm bore. Also, a clean bore versus a dirty bore, right? If you clean, and it's just really hard to do. Most people that clean their rifle don't do this, and I don't do this very often, but you clean the inside of your bore down to bare metal. Like, you get it, so you put a copper patch in there with copper solvent, and you leave it, and you take it out, and it's crystal clear. You can't see any discoloration from copper fouling or powder fouling or any other kind of fouling in your bore. You get it bare metal. Well, it's only going to do that for one shot, because the next shot you shoot after that is going to have copper fouling and powder fouling, and the bore is going to be warmer. So you're literally changing the condition of your bore. Now, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I'm not trying to act like I've always known all this stuff. We learn along the way. But the condition from a completely clean cold bore to your next shot, which is a hot, dirty bore, is going to be far different as far as percentages go from, like, let's say your first shot on a clean, cold bore to your second shot, which is a hot, fouled bore, to your between that and your second and your third shot. So your first and second shot, if you're doing that, is going to be a lot more variability than between your second and your third shot, because between your second and your third shot, if you're shooting a 3-shot group, your rifle's already warmed up, it's already got fouling in the bore, so the conditions are going to be a lot more similar between the second and the third shot. That would be an example. There is a reason when you, like, let's say I shoot CMP, and a lot of other classic rifle disciplines are like this, where you show up to the competition, you may have traveled, halfway across the country, and your rifle's clean, and you go up and toe the line, and they let you shoot spotters. Part of that is to make sure your sights didn't get knocked off and your dope is correct. But part of that is also to get your bore in the correct condition, to make sure that your first shot for score is not a cold bore shot. That's not the case for all competitions, but that's a real common one, because cold bore is a thing. If you are serious about precision shooting, you will generally know the difference in your cold bore dope, your cold bore data. It's going to shoot in a different place. Now, this may seem overwhelming, but let me just say, a lot of the times this is not going to make any difference, right? If you are, let's say, you live east of the Mississippi River and you deer hunt, and the vast majority of deer are taken at the average distance is 80 yards. Well, let's say you sight in your rifle at 100 yards, which I'm not a big fan of, but a lot of people do that. Okay, you sight in your rifle, you shot 10 shots, your barrel is definitely warm and dirty, then you take it home and clean it. And then your cold bore shot is going to shoot 2 inches to the right and 1 inch low. Does that matter if you shoot a deer at 80 yards? No, probably not, because the kill zone on a deer is 6 inches? So it's not really going to matter, and you probably will never know the difference. So you may have been hunting for a decade and done this and never noticed it, because it's inconsequential to you. But it absolutely could make a difference if you were shooting at 200 or 300 yards even, and you missed your deer because you went in, you sighted in your rifle at the local range at 100 yards, and you shot a nice teeny tiny cloverleaf half MOA group. Great, your rifle shoots half MOA, and a lot of people hyperfixate on my rifle shot a half MOA. Then you take it home and clean it, and you give it a clean cold bore, and that's how you take it out hunting, on a clean bore. And you completely miss your deer. And you might think, I just chalk it up to I suck, or I missed that deer because I did whatever, or I did something. Could have been that cold bore dope was totally different. Could have been a mechanical thing. Maybe not. Usually when I miss, I'm like, default is, what did I do wrong? And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised that, my mount was loose, or my machine actually messed up. But generally it was not executing the fundamentals. But absolutely could be that you missed because of this. Your cold bore dope was off. It can make a big difference, right? How small is the target you're trying to shoot? Going back to that, if you're trying to shoot a prairie dog in the head at 200 yards, which is like the size of a walnut, yeah, absolutely this makes a difference, right? So before you freak out, just ask yourself, is it going to matter to you? And this matters a whole lot more on some rifles than others, and I don't completely understand it. In my experience, really thin, and this could just be a coincidence. I haven't, just in my years of shooting and observation and competing and instructing and being a range master and things, like a long, thin pencil barrel could be affected by this more than like a short, stumpy barrel. Real rigid, thick barrel with a larger bore. But this is by no means a hard and fast rule. Your rifle may be dramatically different. It may not make much difference at all between a cold bore shot and a warm shot. So, again, ask yourself, does it really matter to you? But the answer could be yes. You should at least get that dope, get that data obtained in previous engagements, and figure out if it's going to make a difference for you. What then is a gunfighter to do? What then is a rifleman to do? Well, there are some things you can do. First, get the dope, right? Get the data. Go out with a clean rifle, however you normally would clean it, and then shoot your first shot, right? Before you go adjusting anything on your optic or whatever, try as best you can to shoot, 2 or 3 more shots, and then see the difference. You will likely see a difference between your first shot, second, third, fourth shot, whatever it is. You're shooting a 3-shot group or a 5-shot group or a 10-shot group. And try and repeat that process several days in a row. Like every time you go to the range, if you're trying to do this, is bring that rifle and shoot your first cold bore shot on a clean bore, get that dope, and then get what it shoots off a warm barrel, and get that data. And then you can make a decision, like if you're just the kind of guy that needs to clean your rifle every single time, like this is not me, but if you're like, every time I shoot my rifle, I was taught that I need to clean my rifle every single time, so it's going to start with a cold, clean, maybe even slightly oiled bore. Well, if it's a gun for serious use, your first shot's probably going to be the most important shot. So you could make a choice then that you're going to keep that gun zeroed for your cold bore shot. And everything after that, you have to aim slightly lower. You could do that. You could decide, I'm just not going to clean my gun down to, going to clean the bore after every shot. I'm going to shoot it and get it sighted in, and then make sure my cold bore shot on a dirty bore is not much different, and just not worry about it because I'm not going to clean my bore. You could say, I'm going to shoot this rifle, then I'm going to clean it, but before I go out hunting that day, I'm going to shoot a round through it somewhere that's not going to disturb the game and is safe. I'm just going to put a round down the barrel, and I'm going to hunt with it, and then when I'm done hunting, I'm going to clean the barrel again, so that I start off with a closer zero. You could do that. That's a way to remedy that, and that's something I would do when I was guiding. If I cleaned my rifle, I would put a round through it before I went out hunting so that my first shot was going to hit where it was aiming, if I had to do a backup shot or a finishing shot for a client. You could just memorize 2 totally different dope settings for like my cold bore and my warm bore shots. You could find out that, hey, there's only a half MOA difference, so that will be a half inch at 100 yards or, an inch at 200 yards. But you could find out there's only a half MOA difference between, for me, a clean bore and a warm fouled bore. So you're just going to split the difference, right? Your first cold, clean bore shot is going to go and shoot a half inch low and to the left at 100 yards, and your warm bore shots after that are going to shoot, in a group, a half inch high and to the right of your zero. You're going to zero right in the middle, so that if you have to take 2 shots, it's within your reasonable hunting distance or shooting distance. Not going to make that big a difference. You're going to split the difference and zero right in between them. You could do that. That's a way to remedy this. You could, if it's for competition, let's say you're shooting 3-gun or 2-gun. Generally, you'll get to see the stages beforehand. If it's the first stage of the day and your gun's clean, you might think, I have this target array. I'm going to shoot the close target first because, if I'm hosing targets at 25 yards, it's not going to make any difference at all. And then I'll shoot the far target or far targets after my barrel is hot and warm, because that's where I know my dope is. And, that target's really small at 300 yards. There's a pepper popper at 300 yards. I have to shoot quickly, so I'm going to wait till my bore is in the right condition, and I'm going to shoot that target. I'm not going to try it cold because I'm probably going to miss, and it's going to cost me time. That's a way you could remedy it. There's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. Something I should mention is, how many rounds does it take? Well, that depends. Again, do you clean your bore down to bare metal? A lot of people don't. If you clean it down to bare metal, it could take several shots to get your gun shooting back to zero. So if you're like, I had this gun zeroed, last time I went to the range and I shot 12 rounds and I got it zeroed, now I took it out and it's not zeroed again. Well, make sure nothing's loose, the mount's not loose, the scope's not knocked off or something. Make sure you didn't switch ammo, because obviously you can't expect that to shoot in the same place. But assuming all that is good, well, did you clean it? Because it's probably not going to shoot in the same place. So, to what degree did you clean it? If you just ran a bore snake through it, One shot might be enough. If it's you cleaned it down to bare metal with copper solvent and jags and all that stuff, yeah, it might take several shots to get that bore in the same condition or a similar condition to what it was in. This could also happen if you're switching ammo, like you're switching from solid copper ammo to regular ammo. It could even happen if you're switching, let's say you're shooting the classic 308, and you're shooting, you're wanting to switch from a 150 grain bullet to a 180 grain bullet, right? Your first 180 grain bullet may shoot different than your second, third, and fourth 180 grain bullet, even if the barrel's already warm, because it has to lay down copper in a similar pattern. And it might be different between 150 and 180 grain. It may not make much difference at all. Your first shot with 180 grain and your second, third, and fourth shot with 180 grain may be the same. But before you start clicking and doing stuff and chasing zeros, shoot a couple of rounds. Do the new type of ammo, right? Let's say, again, at 308, you were shooting, 150s, and now you went to 175s because you want the super high BC that everybody's talking about. Well, before you start changing your zero and clicking and doing stuff on your scope, shoot a couple of rounds to it to get that bore in a similar condition. Then maybe let it cool and shoot again and get that dope. Don't just assume, I shot my first shot and it's radically different, so I'm going to adjust for that shot. And then you're chasing a zero for half a box of ammo. So even just switching ammo, even if your bore's already dirty, you can have to change the condition because it's going to lay down, different bullets will lay down copper, even different types of copper, because not all copper gilding metal jackets and stuff are the same, even exact same metallurgy, and that can make a difference. Again, the key to shooting in the same place is to have the same conditions. Well, if you switch the different metallurgy of that bullet, that first bullet is going to have different conditions than the second, third, and fourth bullets because it's going down a different track. Consider it like the difference between, driving on a wet road or driving on a dry road. Right, those things make a difference. Again, these are all things to consider. It may seem overwhelming at first. If you're just getting into shooting, don't worry about much of this stuff. Just realize that just the basic big takeaways, if you shot your rifle and zeroed it with a warm, dirty bore and you go and clean it, next time you shoot with a clean, cold bore, it might shoot in a different place. And just realize that that's normal. And just think of how maybe it's inconsequential to you. If you can shoot a basketball-sized group at 100 yards, and where you hunt, if it's a hunting rifle, nothing you see is going to be past 75 yards because you can't see that far in the woods, then just put it back in, the Jeopardy section of trivia stuff for shooting in your mind. But if it's going to be of practical concern, figure out a practical solution. I'm doing this, one, to give you knowledge, but two, to hopefully save you some time, frustration, and concern. Relieve some of that consternation if you go to the range and you're gun shooting in a different place. This could be a reason why. On that, guys, trying to give you some good practical information. If this helped you at all, consider becoming a patron, right? Because you should put, hopefully, some resources and support people that you think are helping you. If you think this information was useful, or any of the other, tactical tips that I put out that you've listened to if you're a regular listener, I'd really appreciate it if you consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. I am not, great at that. I'm not great at marketing myself or advertising, I don't think, but it would mean a lot if you would consider becoming a patron. If this is the first episode you've listened to, don't worry about it. But if you're a regular listener and you get value from this, consider becoming a patron. There's also a lot of extra content on Patreon that you're just not going to get if you're not a patron. This, in fact, going back to the beginning where I started, was like sometimes you just forget all the stuff you learn along the way. This was a question from a patron that if there wasn't a Patreon page, you may have never have heard this, right? So not only does Patreon help and benefit the patrons, it helps and benefits you guys too. So a big thanks to the patrons for myself and for you guys as listeners. You should be very thankful to them too. If you want to step up into that, again, consider it. But this was a question from a patron, and it was a good one because I just forget about it. Like I just one of the things that I know, and I just forget to explain it. But as you might imagine, shooting can be a pretty complex topic sometimes. You get really nerdy into some stuff. And instead of a tactical tip, I'm going to give you like a tactical philosophy thing today, because I feel like there's a lot of tips in here on ways to understand this and work with it. But consider this for a philosophy. This is a theoretical example, right? But let's say that you have your super, nice semi-custom rifle that shoots half MOA. Like you took it out to the range, you put it on a bench, or you put it on a tripod, or you got this big giant scope on there, and you shoot this little teeny tiny ragged hole group half MOA at 100 yards. And you're thinking, I got a half MOA rifle. And then you go home because you really like this gun, and you go and clean it. And you got a clean oiled bore. And then let's just say, because I don't know your rifle, right? This is a hypothetical rifle. Let's just say hypothetically, this rifle shoots, 2 inches, lower and to the right from where your zero was, where you zeroed that rifle when you shot that group. Well, the next time you go and pick up that rifle for that first shot, maybe the first couple of shots, you don't have a half MOA gun at that point, practically in your hand, what you can shoot. You have probably, because it's not going to shoot exactly there, because it's also going to have a group there, you're going to have a more than 2 MOA gun. So, don't hyperfixate on the little teeny tiny groups off a bench to the detriment of understanding everything else. But just again, call it tactical philosophy. On philosophy, on belief, way more important than that stuff is God. Getting back to what's really important. Don't spend all your time nerding out over ballistics and trajectories and how tiny a group you can shoot, and not think about where you're going when you die, because that's a lot longer time period. That's what's really important. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Not a way, not one of 12, right? Not pick your own adventure. He is the way. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You can either believe Jesus, that what he says is true, or you think he's a liar. There's really no middle ground there. He says he is the way. Give that some thought, right? It's pretty important. A lot more important than the stuff we talked about in the body of this episode, right? So Jesus himself says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So hopefully we spend time thinking about that. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.